You know, we make thousands of decisions every single day, and honestly, we don't even think about most of them. But what about the big ones? What is really going on inside our brains when we have to make a tough choice? Well, we're going to dig into a PhD thesis that put our decision-making process right under the microscope. And let me tell you, what it found might just change the way you see your own choices.
Oh, you know the feeling, right? You're staring at what feels like a million browser tabs, trying to compare specs and reviews for a new phone, and you just get totally stuck. Choice paralysis is real. In a world with endless options, how in the world are we supposed to pick the right one? So, it turns out that exact feeling, that paralysis, was the focus of a PhD thesis back in 2012 from the University of Granada. A researcher named Fadi set up a whole series of experiments to try and scientifically decode our psychology when we shop. To really get to the bottom of how we choose, the research kicked off with a really basic question. Beyond all the stereotypes we hear, do men and women actually approach making a decision differently? The study put this to the test, and the results, well, they were surprisingly clear. This first finding reveals something so fascinating about how we see the world. When asked to guess what other people would choose, men generally assumed others would pick something different from them. But women? They tended to assume other people would make a similar choice. It's a really subtle but pretty powerful difference in our default thinking. And yeah, the differences didn't stop there. Throughout the experiments, men were actually more likely to change their minds partway through. Women, on the other hand, were a lot more precise when they ranked their preferences. And, get this, their choices were more logically consistent from the beginning of the experiment to the end. Okay, so that's how we act on our own. But what happens when you throw technology into the mix? The next part of the study did just that. It introduced an AI shopping assistant to see how it would affect these very human decisions. And the results? A whopping 80% of people just went with what the AI told them to do. That's an incredible amount of trust, right? So obviously the researchers had to figure out why. Why are we so willing to listen to a machine? So they set up this brilliant new experiment with a twist. They created 2 different AI advisors. The first one was just a matcher. It recommends things based on what's similar. But the second one was more like a decision therapist, helping people figure out their own priorities first. And here's the wild part. People followed the advice from both of them, even when they suggested completely different products. This showed it wasn't about the specific recommendation, it was about the process of getting the advice. Okay, so if the how is more important than the what, it leads to the next big question. Which method actually works better? Which one leaves people feeling more confident about their choice in the end? That decision therapist AI used a technique called the analytic hierarchy process, or AHP. Now, forget the fancy name. The idea is actually super simple. Instead of hitting you with a big, complicated choice, it breaks it down into a bunch of easy one-on-one comparisons. So it's less of a recommender and more like a mirror. It just helps you see what you really want. And this quote right here really sums up the core finding of the entire thesis. The AHP approach, that therapist approach, helped people understand their own needs way better than just getting a simple recommendation. The real key wasn't getting an answer from the AI, it was understanding why that answer was the right one for them. That's what built real, lasting confidence. So, what's the takeaway here? What do we do with all this information? Well, this research, even though it's a decade old, basically gives us a blueprint for how AI can actually help us make better choices without just telling us what to buy. The thesis actually proposes this hybrid system that gives you the best of both worlds. So step 1, you let a simple matcher AI do all the heavy lifting, filtering 1,000 options down to just the top 3. Then for step 2, the decision therapist AI kicks in. It guides you through a really thoughtful comparison of just those 3 finalists, helping you find your absolute perfect fit. It's all about efficiency, powered by empowerment. And all of this leads us to one final, really big question. This research shows us that the right kind of process can help us understand our own priorities with amazing clarity. So as this tech gets better and better, you gotta wonder, if an AI could understand what you truly want even better than you do, would you let it make the choice for you? Definitely something to think about.